I'm going to talk about the two aspects of community engagement. My example is this. I have a hobby of woodworking. And I'm online and I'm reading an article that talks about building this particular project. And I'm reading that article and it seems pretty interesting. It's something I'd like to make. So I read through it, go through all the detail of how they went about getting the materials and everything. And then I said, I think I'd like to make that project. And then I go to my wood shop and I put saw and hammer and nail to the project. Now, the first part of that is me gaining knowledge. That is engagement as well. Learning about something, I'm engaging my mind. I'm reading something that's interesting to me, and I'm reading about something that I'd like to take action on. I call that passive engagement. I haven't made anything, I haven't done anything, but I'm engaged. When I put my efforts together in the workshop, it goes from passive engagement to active engagement. And I think those are the two things that we'll talk about a lot. Mostly about passive engagement to start with, because passive engagement starts with knowing information. The old saying goes, I can't care unless I know. So I want to talk a little bit about what that all means. A lot of it has to do with transparency. And so I can't engage without knowing. Next slide, Mary. And so transparency is an important part of this. You can't care until you know what you should be caring about, and you won't engage unless you care. It's job one to keep your owners aware of all the community business. And I think that's our job one as board members. What a lot of us fail to understand is that the members in our community are the owners of the community just as much as we are. Now, they've elected us to conduct the day-to-day business, but they've also elected us to keep them informed of the day-to-day business. And so if you want to cultivate an environment of engagement, you've got to get an environment of people who care. And if you want an environment of people who care, you got to have an environment of people who know something to care about. And so that's a lot of what we're going to talk about is I can't engage without knowing what I'm supposed to be engaged about or care about. And the first step is for someone to just understand. Now, our bylaws sort of spell out a level of transparency that we're supposed to have. Everybody is a member in our community of equal standing, just no more equal than we are, no less. All board meetings are open to members. Why is that? Because they need to know what, as much as you know, they need to know what business is being conducted on their behalf. Board members must give members written notice of all board meetings. Well, I can't be there and I can't attend and I can't know what's going on unless I'm at the meeting. Meeting notices must include the agenda. I want to go to a meeting knowing what you're going to talk about. So if there's something that I'm interested in, if there's an opportunity before or after the meeting, I can talk to what I think is some of the issues that may surround this topic. Members of board meetings must be distributed to members within 30 days, members of board meetings, minutes of board meetings, sorry, within 30 days. That's so that if I didn't make the meeting, I get to know what happened. Members' responsibility for participation and governance of the corporation and the operation of the community. We expect the members to participate, and it's their responsibility to participate. We want to create a culture that says, I want to participate to them. Records of co-op except personal info must be made available to all members. The board of directors is elected by the members. They elected us to conduct their business and to keep them informed of the business. Matters outside of ordinary business need member approval. So there's things that the board does on a day-to-day basis that has to be transparent. And then there are items that only members can approve. Budgets, extraordinary expenses, and that sort of thing needs member approval. Members have the right to determine how surplus revenue is used. If you have a surplus at the end of at our annual meeting every year, we elect to put any surplus back into our capital fund, and that's a vote by the members. Only they can decide that. They have two choices. We can give them that surplus back at the end of the year, all $8.77 each, or we can take the pool of that money and put it in the capital fund, which is what we elect to do almost every year. The board must provide annual secretary's report, financial audit, and budget to the members. That's just another level of transparency that your members know what's going on in the community. So in any case, it's job one, and I find and I hear this underlying concern from a lot of people. I'm afraid if they know too much, they'll interfere with what we're trying to do. Total board transparency of all community business. No community business or board conversations via email, only at open meeting. We emphasize this because quite often, if we're going to be totally transparent, we can't conduct business without meetings. All meetings are to be open. If you're communicating as a board via email, you're not totally transparent because you're conducting some business that doesn't have all the flavor of understanding why you're doing what you're doing, or asking each other questions. So Kim, yep.
Wouldn't, because of COVID and everything, wasn't that like made kind of acceptable?
Some folks felt that it was an excuse to be acceptable, but the fact of the matter is that Zoom is a very low cost way of conducting a meeting. The community I live in, when it came to COVID, we decided to do all our meetings via Zoom. We even did our annual meeting via Zoom. And what happened is that, actually people started liking it. We used to have, 12 or 15 people go to a board meeting outside of the board members. And then we started doing Zoom. It sort of grew to 30 to 40 people because they could go to a meeting from their own living room. And so we still didn't, I have had members many times start an email thing and send it to all the board members and start discussion. And the first thing I would say is, this is not an open meeting, and we aren't being transparent. So save it for the Zoom meeting. One of the things that came out of COVID was COVID had a positive effect on my community because we felt that people started becoming more interested because they could go to the board meeting from their own living room sofa. And so when we came out of COVID, we kept the Zoom meetings going even though we were live. We had a grant to provide us equipment. Equipment was called OWL, and it was a piece of equipment that went in the center of the boardroom table, and it broadcast through Zoom to all the members if they wanted to join that way instead of in person. So the last board meeting I went to was just a week or so ago. There was like, there was almost standing room only in the boardroom. And there were like 20 people on the Zoom call as well. So we have twice the participation than we ever had. And that came from we're forced to do some other things. But my point was, the greater point is that you can always find other ways to communicate that you never thought of before. We never thought about doing that until COVID. We were sort of forced to do it. And then we said, well, when we come out of COVID, we're going to keep doing it. Only we're going to do it from our boardroom instead of from our own living room chairs. So in any case, I would caution people, you can't be transparent if you're communicating outside of the boardroom. Now, active transparency. Make use of all modes of communication possible. There's 9 ways to Sunday to communicate. And why would you use all of them? Can somebody give me a quick answer to that? People get their information in different ways. We have a newsletter in our community that is printed and dropped off at every home of someone who wants one by our ambassadors. And it's emailed to everybody who says, I don't read paper, I read emails. So they get it that way. You have to take into consideration how people get their information. Some people read text, some people read email. We have an email blast that promotes activities that are going on in the community and any special thing that's going on within the community. So the bottom line is that, you know, advertisers are well aware that it takes a certain number of impressions before something sinks into somebody's head. And if I get a board meeting information 3 ways, maybe by the 3rd way, it will sink in. The whole point is that you cannot over communicate. And so
moving my stuff around.
We use every method possible to communicate, because we want to make sure that whatever way you absorb information, we have that opportunity for you in our community. And I think it's important for us to think in terms of, if I'm going to communicate, it can't be, well, we put it on the bulletin board. If you didn't read it, then that's your problem. Well, I go to the mail house where the bulletin board is. I get my mail and I leave because I'm in a hurry. And I don't stop and read things like that. But guess what? I read the newsletter. I read my emails on a regular basis. So there's one way or another, I get the information. And that's the tactic we need to take, is that we're building a culture of people who care. And the only way we're going to build a culture of people caring is for people knowing. The only way people are knowing is that we find as many ways as possible to communicate information to them. So in any case, next slide. Good example here. All board members speaking from a unified mouthpiece. If you want a divided community, have a divided board. You have a board of 5, 2 vote for something, 3 vote for the opposite. And the 2 are out there saying, well, I didn't vote for that. And the 3 are saying, well, I voted for it. And so you've got a community that sides with the 2 and a community that sides with the 3, and you've got a divided community. Boards need to understand they are a unified voice. I didn't vote for that, but the majority did, and that's democracy. And more often than not, the majority is more right than the minority, and so we all support each other. If the ruling is we're going to vote in favor of this, then we vote in favor of that, and we vote as one voice. Mary, you got an
share
example?
a quick story there,
Yes.
Kim. This is when Kim was giving me these examples, I thought of a community that I've worked with for a long time. And they had a situation where exactly this situation happened as Kim is describing. They had a bunch of trees come down. The operations team had hired a company to bring down to cut up the trees, not completely, but just into big logs. And they were all sitting there on the side of the road in the community. The board met, the operations team proposed cutting it into cords of wood. And then the discussion started about, would we sell the cords of wood to the members? Would we give the cords of wood away? They came up with a great policy. Some people wanted it one way, some people wanted it another, but they worked out how they would get the wood cut up and distributed, and members would have an opportunity who have wood stoves, and those that didn't might have a family member that could use it. They took a vote. It was 3-2 because some of the aspects of the policy a couple of people didn't agree with. they put the policy out in the community, and right away there were a couple of folks in the community who said, well, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that? And some of the board members, you know, said, well, I didn't vote for it that way, but you know, this is how the others wanted it. And before you know it, it caused all kinds of controversy. And we all got together the next month, and there the wood was, still on the side of the road, never having gotten cut into cords, and nobody had any. But it was just a situation where the board couldn't come off of their vote as one unified voice. So just an example of what can happen.
Good example. And it happens many times that you've got boards need to agree in the end that the majority is what everybody's in favor of. Because it's the one thing that keeps the community together. A board not together means the community is not going to be together. Okay.